Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined by another Pennsylvanian, which is very exciting for me. His name is Chris Rabb, and he is actually running for re-election of State Rep 200th District in the House. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Chris. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So Chris is in the Philly area. That's where 200th District is. You were at the Bernie rally Saturday. You got to meet him, so that's exciting.
No, actually, I wasn't able to get to the rally, but I had some alone time with Senator Sanders. So it was
Awesome.
the second time I got to meet him privately, which was nice. He's great.
He is. He's the best. Yeah, I've met him twice, but like with a room full of like a million other people. So um so your resume is long enough to spend an hour on, so we'll just touch on a few things. You are a Yale graduate who taught at several colleges. Your website says you're committed to social, economic, and environmental justice. You are the treasurer of the PA Legislative Black Caucus and a founding member of the Climate Caucus.
All true.
Awesome. So, what made you decide to start a climate caucus? I
So
mean, I know we need it in PA. Trust me, I know we
well,
need
I,
it.
I live in the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. So it wasn't it it wasn't my idea, but I joined on because it made perfect sense, and I was surprised there hadn't been one prior. So I'm a founding member. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a co-founder, but look, in environmental justice it's a human rights issue. Now it's so bad that even the U.S. military understands that it is at the heart of a worldwide instability. Our next war is going to be over water. Um, and if we don't the earth will handle herself. The earth will survive. The question is, will earth survive with humans on it? We care about our species. We're kind of funny that way. We might care about other species, but we care about ourselves. And so for those people who just have basic self-interest, it's in our best interest to embrace addressing climate change on all levels. And so it just seems pretty straightforward. I'm also a big fan of science and facts. So it just seemed like a good thing.
So, you don't think that global warming is a hoax from the Chinese?
I don't even use the term global warming because, when you have a discussion with someone who doesn't really appreciate science, they'll say, well, how could it be global warming if it's so cold out? Right. So even the
Exactly.
language we use, I don't let people who are anti-choice claim pro-life. I claim it. I said, I believe in reproductive justice, and I believe I'm very much pro-life, but don't, if you're pro-life, what do you do with the baby once it's born? Are you going to
Bingo.
provide for all of those social welfare programs and care for all people, regardless of what zip code or what body they're born into? So we have to be very careful about the language we use. And in Harrisburg, the state capital of Pennsylvania, there are a lot of terms that are used and misused that are very emblematic of the problems we face in society at large.
That's where I am, actually, in Harrisburg, PA. So I spend a
Oh,
lot of time on the Capitol steps and, just kind of knocking on doors and things like that.
no.
um, One of the other things that I found really amazing about what your website says, something that does not get talked about nearly enough. You are on the a caucus for intellectual disabilities and autism, as well as a mental health caucus. These are things that are just, I've interviewed over 70 candidates. They don't really get brought up that much. So can you kind of explain the type of things that you do when you would have meetings?
Um, So those two, anyone can start a caucus. You can send an email to your leadership if you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're on the House or Senate side. At least know among House Democrats, anyone can start a caucus. There's a selfie caucus. There's, I mean, so they're pretty shallow caucuses, to be perfectly honest, and pretty inactive ones. And, you know, there's that kind of XY axes where, you know, active and inactive, substantive and superficial. And separately, the mental health caucuses, they don't meet a whole lot, but there is substantive legislation that a fair number of people who are members of those caucuses support. You know, from a political perspective, it's in now to embrace mental health issues. It's in now to talk about intellectual disabilities, autism, just because of the rate of which people are being diagnosed to be on the spectrum. But what is the nature of that legislation? Is it legislation that comes with funding? Is it something that addresses, you know, kind of acknowledges structural issues that deal with class, that deal with gender, sexual orientation, race, national origin? Are the things that are being considered include people who are not citizens, who are undocumented brothers and sisters? How are they included in all these things? And so those nuanced perspectives in very important issues, whether it's ID or mental illness or autism, sometimes get pushed aside for the more kind of mainstream, kind of bipartisan stuff that is important, but avoids a lot of kind of tough conversations. So I am on any number of caucuses. I've lost track, and they're all informal. They do not require really anything, but every now and then there will be a press conference or a meeting. Sometimes it'll be an informational meeting where you have experts come, and those are good. I have the really great benefit of having a wonderful staff, and some of whom are experts in various fields, and I've learned a lot from my staff who has previous experience in these fields. And it's something I'm really interested in because it should be a bipartisan issue. And it has for too long been matters that people do not feel comfortable talking about. And the magic never happens in your comfort zone. And so for that reason alone, it's important.
Absolutely, right on. And your district is, you know, in Philly area, your constituents are extremely diverse. So, you know, you definitely, that could be advantageous, or, you know, it's also could be, have some difficult things about it, just trying to reach out to everyone. You do talk a lot about immigration, which is awesome. Lancaster has, we're, you know, a huge sanctuary city where they take tons of immigrants. Is that kind of what you want Philadelphia to be like?
I'm really interested in the state as a whole, right? We're a commonwealth. And while there are any number of sanctuaries, municipalities, I'm interested in everyone being protected who may be undocumented, regardless of where they may land in Pennsylvania. And I believe that, look, you know, this is personal, but from perhaps a different perspective. I'm of African descent. I identify as Black. My grandparents were Black. My great-grandparents were Black. All 16 of my great-great-grandparents were born into slavery, and they all died free. But one of my ancestors, Abraham Miller, served in the Union Army. He was out of Louisville, Kentucky, and he was owned by his grandfather. So he was property. When he finished his service, and years later, he wanted to apply for his military pension. The U.S. government said, you have to prove your age. Well, he couldn't prove his age because he didn't have a birth certificate. He didn't have a birth certificate because he was not considered a human being. He was considered property. And when we assess the value of human life based on arbitrary documents, I find that deeply, deeply disheartening and problematic. And that is because that's not just society. We allow that to happen through law, through public policy, and it's state lawmakers that allow that to happen. Slavery was a state law. And so depending on what state you were born into would determine your fate. And I believe that our undocumented brothers and sisters need to be protected, need to be embraced. And so I feel very strongly about that, even though less than 2% of my constituents are foreign born. I believe it's just a basic human rights issue. So, the person who has the greatest kind of ethnic diversity in her district is a Republican out of Northeast Philadelphia, Martina White. And she is the most anti-sanctuary city, anti-immigrant, or I should say anti-non-white immigrant legislator in the state. And it's just a shame. She should be at the tip of the spear fighting for immigration rights and reforms. And yet, you got to do what you got to do, even if your district may not have that profile.
Absolutely, right on. You enacted some things into law. One of the things that I found particularly interesting is called First Chance Trust Fund. Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. First Chance Trust Fund puts a 1% surcharge on the largest contracts, so basically contracts 5 million or more, with the Department of Corrections, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, and it puts it in a fund. And that fund will be used exclusively to provide educational scholarships and grants for support services benefiting youth in the most over-incarcerated neighborhoods across the state. So this, instead of giving folks a second chance down the line, we're trying to remove young people from that pipeline. In fact, we want to make sure that they never get into the pipeline to begin it with. And so if you have a relative who's been incarcerated, you're 7 times more likely to be incarcerated yourself. And the trauma on the child is akin to a death in the family. So this was really important legislation. It was bipartisan. I introduced a bill on the House side in July of 2017, and by the end of the year, it became law. And it's the first of a kind in the state. And I'm proud to say that one of my dear colleagues from the New York State Assembly, State Assemblywoman Christine Pellegrino, has introduced this bill in New York. So I'm excited to see it expand and exceed expectations.
Yeah, that's amazing. Also, as far as prison goes, it kind of leads to it. Do you support marijuana legalization?
I believe presently Pennsylvania has legalized medical cannabis,
Yes.
which I support, but I believe in legalizing adult use cannabis as well. We have to do it right. We have to do it in a way that conforms to public health and public safety issues, and also inclusion. We need to make sure that the economy that springs forth from cannabis is as inclusive, or actually radically more inclusive, than most industries that marginalize people of color and women. So that's really important, particularly given that there has been an industry, the prison industrial complex, has been on the backs of people of color, Black folk in particular, poor people, and a growing number now of women of color. And we have to make sure that those economic ladders are there, because the things that young white men are now going to be making millions off of are this basically the same plant that has ruined whole communities through incarceration, policing, and violence. So that's really important to me. So how we do it is as important as that we do it.
Very good point. Christine is here. She says hi. Hi, Christine. um, you also stated that you are working on abolishing the death penalty.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of government sanctioned murder. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I just, if you could say, even if you could say, oh, we know with 100% certainty that the person we're about to kill actually did it, I'd still oppose it because it doesn't violence. I actually don't believe that we should be in that business. We should keep people safe. There's plenty of ways to do that other than locking people up in cages and then ultimately killing them. And also, I just think that it's highly racialized. If you look at the data is you're basically punishing poor people, Black folk, Native Americans, etc. And the last thing is, and my conservative friends will really appreciate this, it's big government that is very expensive. It's extraordinarily expensive. To put someone on death row is radically more expensive than to educate them. And I guess I'm old fashioned, but I'm a big fan of education. And let's educate these folks so they don't wind up in situations where they might be incarcerated, whether they committed the crime or not. It's just good economic sense. And ultimately, you can tell a lot about a society by how we treat the most vulnerable and how much we invest in people, regardless of what zip code they're born into. And we certainly have plenty of money, as Bernie Sanders likes to say, this is the richest country in world history, ... There are no excuses. We can do this.
Absolutely. You also talk about universal automatic voter registration. And this is a huge deal because, as you know, Pennsylvanians, we're closed at this primary.
Yes.
Which is frustrating as a voter and I'm sure as a candidate. And our state only has to register a month in advance, whereas New York is like 7 months in advance, which is egregious.
Yes.
So you definitely want to do automatic voter registration, which is amazing.
Yeah. So I have a omnibus voting bill. I believe it's HB 1465, but it has everything. It has all the good stuff, right? It has mail-in. It has early voting. It has no excuse absentee voting, because for all of your viewers out there who don't know about Pennsylvania or who are not big on voting, you have to get a note from your mommy, basically, to say you can't vote on election day, which is absurd. It's very paternalistic. And also automatic universal voting, voter registration. I also have in that same bill pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds to let them know that they're about to come into their full citizenship and their rights to participate in our fragile participatory democracy. Also, automatic re-enfranchisement of returning citizens. So if you've done your time in Pennsylvania, you can actually regain the right to vote, which is pretty awesome. I'm surprised how progressive it must have slipped through the cracks somehow. But still, you shouldn't have to jump through any hoops. If you're an adult, if you're a citizen, regardless of your criminal past, you should have the right to vote. And that registration happened without, any muss or fuss. So those are some of the main components of this omnibus bill. It's stuck in a committee run by a white supremacist sympathizer named Daryl Metcalf, along with all of my other substantive legislation and the legislation of every other Democrat. Dozens and dozens of bills stuck there because he does not believe in democracy. He barely believes in government itself. And so we'll see what happens in the next term.
Yeah. What about paper ballots? Do you support that?
I like a paper trail, right? It's so easy to hack these systems. I'm very concerned about it. So we need to have some assurance that what we did has been documented. This is not my field of expertise, but I do know that listening to those who are, our systems are so vulnerable, and we have to have a level of accountability and transparency over how these processes are stewarded. And the public faith is at an all-time low, particularly in light of the ascendancy of 45 and all of the dubious activities around his ascent. So we really have to invest in that. I mean, it's investing in democracy itself.
Absolutely. You do also have, you worked on a Reproductive Health Equality Act.
Equity, health equity, yes. So
I'm sorry, it does say equity.
Yes. Listen, when we talk about reproductive justice, this is a human rights issue. It's not a gender issue. Just because it overwhelmingly affects women does not mean that men should be silent or have no place in this. But the bottom line is every person should have access to preventative and reproductive health services and such, whether they're trans, undocumented, or so on. And so that's explicit in my bill. And, it's frustrating in Harrisburg, where I'm in the smallest Democratic minority in 61 years. And I'm working with, or trying my best to work with, Republicans in a caucus that's dominated, or at least highly influenced by the Tea Party, where they don't like government overreach unless it's into a woman's womb. I just find that the height of hypocrisy and patriarchy. There's another way to define it without cursing. I put that forth, and I'm part of the Women's Health Caucus, and this is an important issue. And look, as a man, I don't need to speak on behalf of any women. Women can speak for themselves, but this is a justice issue, and reproductive rights and reproductive justice should be as important to men as they are to women, because we're part of that reproductive chain. 10 years ago, I chose to get a vasectomy. Now, most men don't talk about that. In fact, they're probably wincing right now thinking about, the procedure. But when I made that decision as a man, I never thought about the political consequences. I didn't think about I didn't think about it because I'm a man and it's my body. And of course, never had to think about those things. That's the privilege of being a cisgender man. But it was a reproductive choice. I made it with my partner at the time. I did it because I thought this was best for our family. And everyone should be able to make that choice without having to think, oh, what are the political consequences? What are the concerns I may have with someone, firebombing, the health facility where I got this done? This is absurd. And so we really have to embrace this as a human rights issue. And other countries are so far advanced on this issue, irrespective of the ideology of the public servants. This is no longer like as much of an issue as it remains here in the United States. And I don't know if that's the curse of Puritanism or what, but we have to get over this.
We do. You are so right. That's a really good comparison, and I've actually never heard anyone use that.
Which comparison?
What's that?
Which comparison?
Oh, the vasectomy.
Oh yeah. Well,
I see a holy mackerel and an oh my god, ouch in the comments.
Oh yeah. So it's like when men watch women's gymnastics, and back in the day with the uneven bars, every time they would come down, and all the men, we would cross our legs. But we got to have these conversations. And I wasn't sure that I was prepared to talk about my vasectomy, as a private citizen, as a new public servant. But when I think about all the things that women have to deal with, all the public and private indignities, all the public policies that are so incredibly misogynistic, I said, I need to get over myself and why not, and just let people know when appropriate about the decision I made as it relates to reproductive freedom. And also to remind men that we have a stake. This is not just is a human family issue, and it's an issue that is deeply personal and ultimately should be under the province of what an adult decides to do for him or herself.
Absolutely. So guys, I apologize. Chris does have to run. This is going to be a short interview, but we vote on Tuesday. So he's busting his ass trying to get people out there to the polls. If there's something you want to leave our viewers to encourage them to recommend you to people in Pennsylvania or to get out to the 200th district and vote for you Tuesday, what do you want to leave them with?
So please know that in Pennsylvania, it's the largest full-time state legislature in the country. And of the 253 of us, some of us are public servants and many of us are politicians. Please understand that the public servants amongst us really genuinely care about our communities and people as a whole, and make yourselves known to us. We need help. Keith Ellison talks about co-governance, where the people hold us accountable, but we also work with the people to make things happen. It's not all going to happen by elected officials. Most of the best things in society were not led by electeds, but smart public servants listen to the will of the people. And to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. And so make yourselves known. Reach out to the people you believe are public servants, even if they don't represent you. So because I'm a state lawmaker, even though I represent 64,000 people in Northwest Philly, I am your servant, right? And use me, because this is how we're going to move things forward. So if you like my values, if you like my platform, if you like my attitude, please join me and let me help you in any way that I can. So this goes beyond the campaign season. This is really about co-governance and trying to make Pennsylvania a better Commonwealth, and how to make society at large more about shared prosperity and bringing people into the fold.
Absolutely. And do you want to give your website quick as well?
Sure. It's chrisrabb.com. That's Rabb like rabbit, R-A-B-B, chrisrabb.com. And on the campaign side, it's Chris Rabb 200 on Twitter and Instagram. And on the government side, it's Rep Rabb, as in representative. Rep Rabb on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us once more. And also thank you guys for watching. Next week, I have more guests as well. Friday, I have a show at 9, as always. But thank you guys for watching. And once more, thank you, Chris. I do just want to tell you guys, I had a candidate on who I really loved, and yesterday she lost by 51 votes.
Oh, goodness.
So that is the epitome of why everyone needs to get off their ass. Tuesday, all you states voting, get out there and canvass, phone calls, whatever you could do. We need to get progressives elected. We have to. So thank you guys again for watching, and thank you so much, Chris. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.